Dr. Dorothée Vandamme, you have the floor.
Thank you, Junaid, and thank you to the EFSAS team for organizing the seminar. It's always a pleasure to be part of your events. So I will be talking today about Pakistan in particular and the financing apparatus for terrorists in Pakistan. In the conclusion, I will just expand on the implication for South Asia more generally and Kashmir in particular. So to start off, some pieces of the puzzle that we're dealing with here, some things to keep in mind when we're talking about terrorism in South Asia. The first one being that in worldwide terrorist attacks, there is often a Pakistan connection. Either terrorists have been to Pakistan or they are including networks that have a Pakistan connection in some ways. So there is a strong connection between terrorists worldwide and Pakistan. We also know that Pakistan establishment uses some terrorist groups for their political goals, especially against India. The most known examples being the Jaish-e-Mohammed or the lashkar-e-taiba operating in Kashmir. And they differ, they make a difference between those groups they call strategic assets that are focused on India and Afghanistan, and those that have an anti-Pakistan agenda, which are labeled by the establishment as terrorists. This is something I've already talked about in a former event, but the link between the army and insurgent groups is the result of several phenomena. So very quickly, there's the link between the recruits, military recruits, and the insurgent social groups. They know each other or they know of each other. Or there's collaboration with, or at least sympathy for the causes of insurgent groups. There are, despite an extremely tight vetting system within the armed forces in Pakistan, there are extremist elements in the military. And what we have seen, especially since the last election, is the army's policy of mainstreaming insurgents into political life, which actually increases also the links between them. Another piece of the puzzle to keep in mind is that the military is the main, if not the sole actor with regards to terrorism. Afghanistan, Jammu and Kashmir, India, nuclear, they will not let the civil political leaders take care of those issues. They will keep the high hand on these questions. And finally, to link with the financial aspect of terrorism, recent studies have shown that there is a direct link between financial capabilities of terrorist groups and terrorist attacks. It actually seems kind of obvious, but sometimes it's useful to point it out to remind it that credit constraints are the most important constraint for terrorist groups. If they don't have any finance, they can't carry out the attack, they can't operate. Kind of seems logical. So what I'll be developing here is basically this nexus, the establishment militant mobster nexus, and how that favors the finance of terrorist groups. So how exactly state agents, including the military, support terrorist groups more precisely? Next slide. Well, you have a variety of logistics for the military to support those groups. There's hosting, which is the most commonly known, providing financial and material supplies, weapons, explosives, intelligence gathering, intelligence sharing, expertise, provide classified documents, identity documents, etc. Some constitutional engineering, so shaping legal codes to favor terrorist groups. One of the things that we have seen that has been most visible is shaping the definition of terrorism, which can enable to include or exclude some groups into what is terrorist. The use of extralegal powers is also being used, and finally some what I call active actions, so the suppression of political parties, censoring of the media, kidnapping, arbitrary arrests, threats, or reprisals against political opponents and families, etc., etc. That kind of shape the system in favor of those groups that the military supports. When we talk about the nexus between organized crime and terrorism, the first problem that we face is actually a conceptual one. If you look, there are some researchers who have tried to evaluate the number of definitions that there is on those two phenomena. There are about 250 plus definitions of terrorism out there, and about 200 or more definitions of organized crime. So if you combine the two to try and see the interactions, you get possibilities of about 50,000, I think, something like that. The problem is not only academic, although we in academia tend to be very much focused on our definitions. It's also a legal one, because actors, political actors, don't know who or what they are targeting, because everybody differs on the definitions. What are we dealing with exactly? So where does that group fit? Is it an organized crime group? Is it a terrorist group? The problem is that depending on where you will fit the group, you will give a different answer, a different response. To complicate things further, organized criminal groups have used terrorism or can use terrorism as a means to reach their end. And we know that terrorist groups do use organized crime activities to finance their own operations. So, is there a link between the two? It's obvious. And actually some researchers have gone further, talking about the fact that maybe we're just talking about overlapping versions of a similar phenomenon, violent hybrid organizations, as an expression of criminal accumulation. Well, we have to keep in mind that they have different motives, they have different objectives. Organized crime are focused on profit seeking, and terrorist groups usually have power seeking as an objective. Basically what they seek is dominance over some territories where they can operate beyond the reach of law enforcement agencies. So in that way they actually are similar. In terms of fundraising means, there's a range of instruments to raise funds that they have available. So I'll just go through the primary means that are used and that are linked to organized crime by terrorist groups. So next slide. Narco-traffic, especially in South Asia, with Afghanistan, as you might know, producing 85 to 90% of the world production of opium. It is actually the main source of income for Pakistan-based terrorist groups, to the extent that some have talked about narco-jihad, to talk about this phenomenon. Using the drug trade is a way for terrorist groups to ensure not only easy financing, but also to guarantee their survival, their sustainability, because it's a market that will not close down. Drugs is a pretty booming market. It's an estimation, about 40% of Afghan opium is smuggled through Pakistan. And at the height of the Soviet invasion in Afghanistan, drug mafias have established contact within the Pakistani government, with the military and with some civilian leaders. Those links have persisted, they became personal, so the drug mafias can operate in Afghanistan and smuggle drugs through Pakistan, and terrorist groups can actually get some money from that dealing. Next slide. Oh, sorry, I forgot that. So just a quick map to keep in mind that Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iran are part of what we call the Golden Crescent in terms of drug smuggling. And you have the map, the biggest map that shows the traffic, the drug traffic. So the arrows show the drug routes, and the little squares, they show the main laboratories for transforming opium. The Hawala system is also a link between terrorist groups and organized crime. So for those who are not familiar with this system, it's an informal value transfer system, which is based on trust, which is easily exploited by those who engage in illicit money transfer because it can leave little to no paper trail. And we know that there's a high number of unlicensed, so unmonitored, hawaladars in Peshawar and Karachi in particular. So it's easy for terrorist group to get money from foreigners anywhere in the world through this hawala system, because there's little way to trace the money. Next slide. The abuse of the charitable sector, suffice to mention the name of the Falah Insaniyat Foundation, linked with the Jamaat Dawa and lashkar-e-taiba group. Just a reminder that the zakat levy is mandatory in Pakistan, and it's one of the 5 pillars of Islam, so it's a religious obligation, and terrorist groups have been able to exploit that to their benefit. So either by linking themselves to existing charities, or by actually creating charities to get money from that system. Next slide. And finally, kidnappings, which is probably the easiest way for a terrorist group to generate fast money. So the map here shows that, as you might know, Pakistan is a hotspot for kidnappings, with some particular profiles being at risk: businessmen, corporate executives, overall wealthy people, foreigners, aid workers, diplomats, and some minorities in Pakistan are particularly targeted, the Shia and the Ahmadis in particular. It's actually, for the terrorists, it has dual purpose. It generates funds, but it's also a way to spread terror. And in some cases, we have seen that the actual kidnapping itself is being outsourced to criminal gangs and not operated by the terrorist groups themselves. Again, some high-risk areas as well, with Peshawar, Balochistan, especially in Quetta, and the tribal areas, which are considered as the most dangerous areas for those kidnappings. Next slide. So for future developments that we can see in the region with this link, the fact that those links are not only institutionalized, but they're on a personal level. They're based on personal contact. They know each other. People in the military, insurgents, and people in organized criminal groups, they know each other on a personal level. That guarantees the survival of this nexus. And this is probably one of the most important elements that guarantees the survival of each individual group, but also of the overall system. The fact is that military will probably not stop using terrorist group as strategic assets, which means that those terrorist groups will still need financing, and they will keep those contacts alive and well to make sure that they get the finance to operate. And with the recent event in Kashmir, it's probable that it will actually increase, because they will have more incentive to operate. Because they have this nexus, because they have linked to the establishment, and because they have finance, they have little incentive for negotiation, which means that talking to terrorist groups might not go a long way for officials who actually try to improve the situation. We take the example of the Afghan Taliban. They might have fewer incentive to negotiate. They've got time and they've got money. So they just have to wait for the US withdrawal. They'll be fine, basically. There's an increased role of technology as well. As I was talking about those personal contacts, but because technology is evolving, it enables us to be connected so easily. Well, it enables them to be connected as well, right? So it gives them a way to contact each other, to get to know each other better, etc. So technology facilitates cooperation, new communication technologies. The problem here that we have is that on the official level, when we want to act on this nexus, where do we start? And so far there has been a lack of synergy between counterterrorism and law enforcement. So basically to respond to terrorist group, you deal with counterterrorism, and when you want to deal with organized crime, you go to law enforcement agencies, right? There has been some examples of ad hoc cooperation between counterterrorism agencies and law enforcement agencies. This needs to be systematized. They need to work together, to share intelligence, to operate together. Because if you don't cut the finances of the terrorist groups, you just won't hurt them that much. So this would be, to me, the most problematic situation in terms of how to respond to terrorism financing, that we have to work actively with law enforcement agencies. Thank you.